Can they beat Rattenpikemen? Of course they won't lose. Hello everyone, this video is about the buffed Claymores. When the unit was first added, they were used quite a bit, but they eventually disappeared from the battlefield due to a lack of firepower and poor synergy with teammates. Since they've been strengthened with the unit mastery, I've done some testing and will show you how they perform in actual gameplay. Let's get into it. Here's the veterancy line I used. Since this is a unit designed to dump high firepower in a short window, I chose the top line to boost their damage output. These are the added unit mastery. While they mainly focus on increasing firepower, the addition of a 2-second crowd control (CC) immunity when using skills is a major change. The doctrine build is as follows. This unit's performance was unique, but they weren't being picked because their firepower paled in comparison to other units. There are 3 active skills. The first skill is Highland Charge. It's your standard charge. If used while skill 3 is active, its block break value increases. Upon testing the maximum attack targets, it appears to hit up to 2 targets. The second skill is Claymore Strike. They perform a 3-hit combo on the spot. When used during skill 3, this becomes the unit's primary burst skill. Regarding block break, it looks like this. They barely chip away at blocks, so you'll need block break doctrines if you want to break through shields. Based on my testing, this 3-hit combo hits about 4 to 5 targets. The third skill is for Freedom. This is the unit's buff skill. While active, it provides damage reduction, increased attack power, movement speed, and health regeneration for 15 seconds. If this buff is applied while other passive skills are active, it slightly enhances those passives. Therefore, the basic way to play this unit is to trigger this skill before using the others. However, with a 45-second cooldown, they aren't suited for continuous fighting. To give you the harsh reality, in the hands of advanced players with voice chat, this unit transforms into a powerhouse that can buff allies while dealing massive damage, but they are unsuitable for beginners or low-skill players. The reasons are simple. Those players don't watch the map, don't coordinate with teammates, and have poor unit control. Plus, the unit itself isn't built for back-to-back engagements. If you are under level 1000 or don't have the enough doctrines, I recommend using the Berserkers instead. The proof is in the honor cost. Most players likely unlock units via the unit tree, and this unit requires twice the points of the Berserkers. Now, let me explain the difference between having the buff active or not. First, let's check skill 1. The buffed version breaks blocks better, but if you have Line Breaker Doctrine, using skill 2 before skill 1 seems to result in more damage. By the way, if the enemy has no shields, either way is fine. Next, let's check skill 2. With the buff, you deal more damage, take less damage, and it also grants a knockback effect. However, the buff only lasts 15 seconds, and you can only use each skill once before waiting 45 seconds for the cooldown. Finally, let's look at standard attacks. No one else has tested this, so it's not well known, but the number of targets for standard attacks increases to a maximum of 6 while buffed. This is quite strong. Many people test based on the assumption that the buff is always active, but in reality, you'll be forced to fight without it far more often, so you won't get as many kills as you'd expect. So let's test how a 1 versus 1 goes with and without the buff. First, a comparison against Rat and Pikemen. The survival rate changes drastically depending on the buff. Next, let's try it against Modal Battalion. I think you can see how much the performance swings based on the buff. That said, if you're using this unit in solo queue, I think they are best used around the supply points on defense. This is because after using skill 3, you're stuck with a 45-second wait, but you can solve that cooldown issue by swapping to a different unit. Now, here is the actual gameplay. First, let's check the proficiency of my teammates. When an enemy is spotted, a red mark appears on the map, so I'm checking if my teammates are looking at the map. One person pinged, so they noticed, but many others didn't realize the units were approaching. It seems the skill level of my allies is low. I judged that many players were just following teammates without looking at the map. I entered combat without skill 3 available. This is what I mean by being unsuitable for continuous fighting. Since the enemy has entered the supply zone, I can't even swap units. If you watch the map, you'll notice the enemy approaching, but my teammates didn't notice at all because they weren't looking. After the units of those not watching the map were overrun, I moved in to clean up. Realizing many of my teammates couldn't read the map, I rushed to point C even though my skills were on cooldown. I threw my unit in for now, then half the players abandoned the supply point and came to C. They were all just chasing the enemy in front of them without looking at the map, had no sense of defending the supply point, and I couldn't expect any strategic movement, so I decided coordination was impossible and moved my unit to a different supply point. As you can see from this brief clip, this unit is heavily influenced by the map, offensive, defensive formations, and the proficiency of your teammates, so I don't think they are for beginners. After testing the usability this time, my conclusion is that they are not suitable for beginners. They can put out temporary burst damage, but berserkers are much easier to use. However, for advanced players who can coordinate via voice chat, I highly recommend this unit.